Senior participant in My name is Monica Pascual. I'm Senior Participant Engagement Manager at the Young Global Compact Netherlands, and I'm delighted to have you here today. And we're going to have an insightful session ahead, so let's start introducing a bit our speakers. So we have my colleague, Jamie Holton, Senior Program Manager at the Young Global Compact, and Magdalena Guaia, Organizational Behavior Expert and alumna of one of our programs. And together we're going to explore how companies can advance diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of a responsible and sustainable business strategy. So let's dive in. Before we dive into diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would like to take a step back and look at how we got here and where we are today. We were launched 25 years ago by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, who brought together 40 CEOs at the Global Economic Forum in Davos to initiate a global compact of serious values and principles that will give a human face to the global market. At that time, 40 CEOs signed up and laid the foundation for what has now grown into a global movement for responsible business. From that initial vision, the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact were developed, covering human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. These principles serve as a universal framework for corporate responsibility, guiding companies to embed ethical and sustainable practices. Every CEO of participating companies of the UN Global Compact commits to embed these principles. At the same time, we also have the Sustainable Development Goals, which provide a clear roadmap for companies to take action. Since those 40 CEOs that join us, we have grown a little bit. So we are now the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative with more than 21,000 businesses across 160 countries, alongside of more than 3,000 non-business. And we are now based in more than 70 countries. And here in the Netherlands, we are a little bit smaller. But we have around 370 companies. We will share later, maybe in the link as well in the chat, if you want to take a look on who are the other participants, so you can take a look. But how do we translate this commitment into impact? At the UN Global Compact, we help businesses to drive impact on key sustainability challenges where the private sector has the greatest influence. We scale ambition, empowering companies of all sizes to take bold action, and we measure progress with our communication on progress, providing a trusted platform for companies to report on their sustainability journey. And with that, I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Jamie Holton, who will dive deeper into today's topic and explore how diversity, equity, and inclusion connects to responsible business. Jamie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Monica, and great to be here this morning. My name is Jamie Holton. As Monica said, I'm a Senior Program Manager here at the UN Global Compact in the Netherlands. What that means is I support our companies with their human rights policies and efforts, as well as their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, so also known as DEI. So I would love to show you all how DEI is key to being a responsible and sustainable business. So let's zoom out a little bit. What's the state of our world when we're looking at diversity and inclusion? Globally, the UN estimates that 1 in 6 people worldwide experience some form of discrimination, and this is particularly the case for women and people with disabilities. So that means, there's still a lot of widespread discrimination happening around the world, and their human rights are therefore being violated. Zooming in on gender inequality, UN Women estimates that it will take around 140 years for women to be represented equally in positions of power and leadership at work. So this is also where human rights are being violated at the workplace. Also to share some headlines with you, the World Justice Project finds that discrimination globally is getting worse around the world in the last few years. And we also have some new developments that can pose risks for those human rights. For instance, how artificial intelligence or AI is actually sometimes reinforcing gender biases that we have. So this is more important than ever now to focus on how we can stop discrimination and how we can tackle these inequalities that might actually be growing with some of our current technological developments. Zooming in on the Netherlands, the Dutch Bureau of Statistics, CBS, estimates that 11% of people living in the Netherlands over the age of 15 have experienced discrimination in the past year. So that's about 1.6 million people. So here in the Netherlands too, discrimination is a really important issue. The SDG review that's done yearly on how the status of the Sustainable Development Goals is, when it looks at the Netherlands is ranked 25th out of 27 EU countries when it comes to the amount of women in management positions. So I think maybe some of us might feel that in the Netherlands, we think we're doing pretty well when it comes to gender equality. However, when we're comparing ourselves to our neighbors in the EU, we're actually not even the average. We're doing quite poorly. We're kind of at the bottom of the list. So here we also still have a lot of important work to do to improve gender equality and, of course, diversity and inclusion overall, to also make sure we address broader discrimination issues. A few headlines to highlight here. They're in Dutch, so I'll translate. But in the past year, more jobs were supposed to be created for people with a disability. However, that still proves to be very difficult for companies. So there's still challenges in making sure that our workforce is more inclusive. And also we see that there are companies who are seeing successes when it comes to diversity and inclusion. However, they're having difficulties also involving men with these efforts. And that also poses a risk for how sustainable and long-term these diversity and inclusion efforts are. So here again, we have challenges in making sure that everyone is caring about these issues and there's buy-in to make sure that these efforts are long-term and sustainable. So how does this all relate to the work at the UN Global Compact? So when companies commit to the 10 principles for responsible business, the ones that Monica highlighted earlier, they actually commit to a few principles that tie in to the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So companies commit to a few principles around human rights that are relevant here. So principle 1 is that businesses should support and respect the protection of internationally proclaimed human rights. And 2, they should make sure that they are not complicit in human rights abuses. Now, what kind of human rights are internationally protected and proclaimed? Some of them are actually established in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You might be familiar with them. They were launched in 1948 with Eleanor Roosevelt as one of the pioneers in establishing them. And here it outlines that human rights and humans are treated equally or should be treated equally on the basis of just them being humans, and there's no discrimination allowed based on any identity characteristics. So age, gender, political affinity, and so on. So these are some of the international rights that people have a right to, and by committing to the UN Global Compact 10 principles, companies are also committing to uphold these human rights. Now, another principle that companies are committing to that relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion is principle 6, which relates to the area of labor, and that is to uphold the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. So this is closely linked to the previous principles, but it's specifically saying that in areas of business, companies commit to not discriminate people based on any of these identity characteristics. So here the ILO conventions, the International Labor Organization conventions, actually already outline some of the key identity characteristics where companies and people cannot discriminate on. So you'll recognize quite a few of them: race, sex and gender, religion, political opinion, but also things like pregnancy and family responsibility. So here again, companies are committing to uphold any efforts to make sure to not discriminate people based on these qualities. And so companies can uphold these principles and eliminate discrimination through their own strong diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and practices. Now you might think, okay, that sounds morally very justifiable, but why should companies do this, right? If they're focused on creating sustainability, if you want to be a more sustainable business, how does this tie into all of that? Well, we actually know that sustainability issues affect certain groups of people disproportionately. So for instance, women, low-income households, and marginalized communities disproportionately bear the burden of climate change and energy inaccessibility. So if we want to have a just transition where we are creating a more environmentally friendly, energy inclusive society, then we also need to make sure that we're actually creating sustainability initiatives that are enjoyed by everyone. So here there's some sources from the International Energy Agency and the UBQ saying how with your sustainability efforts, it's important to focus on who are actually being impacted the most. And that requires applying this inclusive lens from the start. Now, we also know that companies with more diverse boards perform better on all aspects of ESG, so environmental, social, and governance areas. So more diverse stakeholders and more diverse boards therefore also lead to more sustainable and stronger outcomes. So if you want to focus on environmental sustainability, maybe it is also worth focusing on your diversity, equity, and inclusion in your company. And here there are some sources from Harvard and PDI. There's so many resources on this, so don't take it from me. But just to say that working on diversity, equity, and inclusion is a way to also focus on your sustainability. Now, I am very happy to hand over the word to Magdalena Guaia. Magdalena is an organizational behavior expert. Going back one bit. Magdalena is also applying her background in social psychology to companies. And for instance, in one of her last roles as the Global Diversity and Inclusion and Change and Culture Projects at Oxford Nobel Advisor. And I think what's really worth mentioning here is that Magdalena is also an alumni of the UN Global Compact Network Netherlands. So she's in a great position to also tell you how working together with the UN Global Compact can help your efforts here. So Magdalena, over to you.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you for having me here today. So I would like to start a bit on the actual business case behind DE&I. So when we kind of reflect on the reasons why DEI is incorporated into the organizations, we have to think of like what is their motivation behind it, because it's not only about doing the right thing, it's also about doing what is beneficial for the organization. So if you kind of think of the reasons why, one is to create equality. This means that organizations, and this is partially why Kofi Annan started this from back then, is because organizations play a substantial role in the way societies are shaped, and creating equality is something that can be done from the inside of the organizations and help people move forward and progress in their lives, building generational wealth, etc. Another reason is because there are certain legal requirements that in specific countries organizations are asked to comply with. So that may also be a motivation, such as certain quotas for people with disabilities that exist, for example, in Brazil. Another one is increasing reachability, and this means that if you're able to mirror the society where you operate as an organization, you have a larger customer reach. You're able to understand your customer better. And the other one is increasing diversity of thought. This means that if you have a lot of people from different backgrounds, different education, ages, race, ethnicity, sitting in a table, in an environment where people are able and comfortable to share, then this means that people will be sharing and bringing ideas to the table that maybe people haven't thought of before, and they represent a part of a minority or a society that may be overlooked. So that's the reasons why. So, and beside of the reasons, and Jamie already touched on some of the points, there is overwhelming amount of research that shows that there are lots of benefits for including diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in organizations. They have, and what you see here is research that has been done by very various yet very renowned and reliable either universities or research facilities that have really kind of shone the light in the idea that like having different people from different backgrounds, from different interests, sitting around a table can bring a lot of benefits. And not only that, there's a lot of research that shows that we are biased against the way that we behave and the choices that we make, always tending to incline ourselves to choose for the people that we feel more connection with. And that may be because of their background in education, their background in more cultural aspect, And that already kind of prompts us to stay away and shine out from what is different, what will actually bring innovation. So I'm not going to dig into each of these topics, but there is a solid business case. And I actually stole this slide from the UN Global Compact, because the UN Global Compact can also help you collide and make a business case for your organizations. And they have a lot of material that they can share with you. But when it comes to the organizations and the corporate environment, it's very clear that in the right context, you are able to boost performance and sustainability, which is in the end what everybody's after. So sometimes it's about playing it smart. So if we think of like, if we look at the research that there is there that shows us that we are like so inclined to maybe let go of all of this and not pay attention to D&I, yet we see that there's a lot of research. What is impeding organizations from including or going ahead with their DEI plans? And what we see is that lately there's, and really varies on the organizations, there's lack of leadership support, which means that like many organizations have managers or executives that don't prioritize DEI or view it as a secondary concern. The other one, and it's something that is becoming very present, is the social and political landscape, where we've seen a major shift in the US, for example, where there was a strong focus and a lot of attention being put on DEI. And since the assumption of Trump as president, that has already shifted, and we see a lot of the companies, especially in the financial sector, that have separated their efforts or canceled them completely because of political or conveniences, which of course also makes sense given the context, if you want to kind of continue as organization. The other one is the lack of clear communication. So sometimes the DEI goals or strategies are not often well defined, and that means that it becomes very broad or very abstract, and it's very hard to keep track on it. That's why like setting clear KPIs is essential for this. Also to be able to track progress. The other one is the resistance to change, and that happens to all new initiatives in all types of organizations, which is why communication and a clear change plan is important for this, because you need to be able to show what is the current state and where you're heading towards with this, and be able to go with your employees through the change curve and understand that there will be resistance and that the change is not something linear. People need to get accustomed to it, and to do that, there needs to be a lot of like leadership support. So a lot of these things go hand in hand. Also connected to this is the lack of understanding. This means that people have a certain preconceived idea of what is the E&I, what is the impact that it will have, and how does it impact you as an employee. Some people may feel threatened or feel that this is something that will go against maybe even their values. But once you put it down in paper, you kind of have an opportunity to show this and explain it, then you will see that employees will grasp it. And the idea of, for example, educating on concepts such as unconscious bias, which is something that we all have, will help you kind of shift towards a more amicable approach with DEI. And the final one, and is a very popular one, is the financial constraints. Because DNI is often seen as what we mentioned as a good to have or nice to have, it's one of the first things that are cut off when it comes to companies that are facing some financial constraints. So it's also very important to set this from the start and say, okay, how, if there are financial constraints, what can we do to keep this going and not just cut it because of financial constraints? So if we think of like, we know what the hurdles can be, then how can we best manage our stakeholders to be able to reap its benefits? These are some ideas. And of course, like, and if we can always have a conversation on the side if you like to kind of really dig into it. But like, if you really want to kind of have, be able to manage your stakeholders and be able to set a strong foundation, One of the things that you should do is to identify supportive C-suite leaders and get their sponsorship. So make sure that for every initiative you have as someone in a leadership position that will stand by you and say like, yeah, this is something that we as a company see as important. This is my own story. This is how this has been relevant in my years. The other one is to set a clear strategy with tangible KPIs and expected outcomes. This will help you manage expectations, but also be able to show that there's progress. And setting KPIs can be sometimes a bit tricky because it's something that is also hard to measure in all aspects of D&I because it can get quite broad. But if you look, okay, like for example, what if you have a certain way of measuring the way people feel in the organization? That way you can measure inclusion, and you can start thinking, okay, if the levels are low, what can we do to actually feel make people feel like they're being included and valued as employees? Maybe dig into certain minorities, and for certain minorities you need to be able to start looking into how to collect data. That's also something that can be done, and that's also something that you can measure. Educate employees on the topic. That is fundamental because like as all change, you want to have people go and accompany you through the change, and for that education is important. And what we mean by education is understanding like why, again, taking it to the business case, why do we have this in organizations? What is the interest of companies and in including this? A very important one is to define a budget and stick to it. So once you set up a strategy, make sure that you have a certain budget, that you know where you want to spend your money. You are able to kind of define that from the start and already start tracking it and making sure that you're sticking to the budget, and that you from the start you set up a robust kind of plan so that you know where the money is going to be allocated, and you're able to see and show what the outcomes of having a budget and spending money on this has. Another one is outline external stakeholders and set up external partners, and I will dig a bit more into this point in a second. And the last one, and very important, and I've been measuring already, is to measure, iterate, and scale D&I impact. Make sure you measure. Make sure that you repeat and you showcase and you make people aware of how the change is going and like what are the initiatives that are happening so that you are able to scale the impact. People need to be informed, people need to know what is going on, and people need to feel that this is part of the company's strategy overall. So if I dig into the last point, outline external stakeholders and set up external partners, you can link this into the UN Global Compact and think, okay, how can the UN Global Compact Netherlands support the journey on DE&I? So what we have here is that the UN Global Compact is a very renowned organization. Like it's comes with the UN, which means it has a very strong name next to it. That can really help you connect with stakeholders within the organization, but it also has a name that has been able to bring and attract a lot of the very relevant organizations that are in the Netherlands and bring them together. So as a starting point, you know that you are linked to an organization that has a very prestigious name to it. Aside from the name, the UN Global Compact is able to connect the organizations together, allowing companies to share their best practices and their lessons learned, and create a forum for organizations to learn from each other. And in a context where people want to grow and people want to make changes for the best, it's a great forum because companies feel the need and feel the comfort to share what the hurdles are and what is really working for them. It's a great platform to learn from each other in a very kind of safe environment. The other one is that the UN Global Compact offers a solid framework. It's something that they have at a global level, but at the same time that they've been able to adapt locally. And it has a lot of useful material that to set up a foundation, it's great, but also to get ideas from and to share resources, from the UN Global Compact to your company is also great. And the other one is that you are able to get professional advice, or you are able to get connected with experts, in the sense that if I'm looking to collide data on, for example, how people identify themselves in terms of race and ethnicity, I, in the past, have reached out to the UN Global Compact to ask, okay, do you have any other company that is doing this? Is there anybody that you can connect me with? Do you have any data that you can help us with? And for that, they've proven to be very helpful and very hands-on. So I also appreciate my time in collaboration with Jamie, Monica, and the team. So that's a bit of the business case to it, and how like the external stakeholders and the partnerships can really help the DEI initiatives.
Thank you so much, Magdalena. It's really great to have your own personal insights here, but also in your professional experience, how this business case for DEI can be made. We have some people here, so if you're interested in asking Magdalena any questions, please do that in the chat and we'll get to that. I also want to launch a quick poll to see which of the motivating factors are there for companies to work on DEI. So I will start a poll. You should hopefully be seeing that on your screens right now. Which of the biggest, the reasons in this poll are the biggest motivators for your company? So choose the one that's the biggest for your organization. It could be to create equality, that could be the motivator. It could be to comply with the legal requirements, as Magdalena said, increasing reachability, so a wider customer base or client base, increasing diversity of thought, all of the above, or you're still working to motivate your company. That's, of course, very understandable. There's some barriers that Magdalena already highlighted. So no problem if that's the case. And we also have a question from Dr. Ahmad. Great, we'll get to that very shortly. I think we have a few more people who need to fill out the poll, but what we're seeing on our side right now is that most of you say that the motivator is to increase diversity of thought. After that, it's all of the above. So that's really all of the reasons. Some of you are still working to motivate your company, and others are working on DEI to increase reachability. So those are the motivating factors there. So maybe, Magdalena, how would you reflect on this? That diversity of thought comes first, then maybe followed by, some people still working to motivate their company. Do you have any words or reflections on that?
Well, it's actually a great motivator. The diversity of thought is, I think, is the strongest one. And if you ask me, I think it's the one that we should all be focusing on. Diversity of thought sets up the base for what will become the business case. That's how you eventually also can increase reachability, if you allow for this diversity of thought to take place in the conversations. So I'm glad that at least that's a great motivator.
Great. Thanks, Magdalena. Yeah, I think there's some great examples of companies who have tried to be more inclusive, and that also creates more inclusive products and services, which then, increases their client base, but also just their profitability, right? So diversity of thought can have a lot of the financial benefits, as well as, diversity of thought can help with the sustainability efforts that you have, because you have more people thinking of creative and long-term solutions. So that's great to hear. We have a question from Dr. Ahmad on how is diversity, equity, and inclusion impact measured in view of GDPR, so some of the privacy legislations that we have here in the Netherlands. Do you want to comment on that, Magdalena?
Sure. So, like DE&I, there's for example, if you want to collect data on race, ethnicity, on how people identify themselves in terms of LGBTI, it's something that can be done. It's relatively new, and it's something that is applicable for all of the European, the EU countries. And what it says that you have to have a very clear case for the consent. First of all, make sure that this is something, if you are going to collect data on these areas, it needs to be voluntary, and you have to show a very clear intent. So what is it that you're going to use this data for? So in terms of the impact, it's a later stage on how you make use of this data. But in terms of like, if you can, yes, you can, and it's GDPR okay in that sense. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thanks, Dr. Ahmed. Let us know in the chat if that has helped. Then we have a question from Linda, one of our colleagues at the UN Global Compact, reflecting on the fact that we have a few SMEs, so small to medium-sized enterprises here in the webinar with us. They might deal with different challenges to accelerate diversity, equity, inclusion. They have a smaller workforce, smaller team, potentially fewer resources, or missing maybe some of the certain organizational structures that bigger companies can use. What do you have in terms of advice for smaller SMEs who want to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, it can actually be a good place to start, because it's few of them, and it's easier to reach all of them as well. So, and something that DEI has, that it involves all of the employees. You cannot have DEI without having the employees actually involved. So it's a good way to actually set it up and say, okay, like, let's all play a part in this. There might be someone that might be more interested or leading it, and may have a bit more of a say in it. But it's a good example it's a good place to actually start it off and motivate others to join and start educating from the base. I think it's a good opportunity.
Thanks, Magdalena. I think that's good to remember. The size of your company comes with pros and cons in terms of trying to address diversity, equity, inclusion. Like you say, it might be easier to engage people on diversity, equity, inclusion, and easier to maybe already start seeing some impacts for smaller initiatives. So also see your size perhaps as a potential pro in starting to work on this. There's another question from Dr. Ahmad on research papers or case studies that document that diversity creates innovation and better engagement. So that's the slide I think that you showed, Magdalena, on all of the research on the benefits of DEI. There's definitely some on innovation and engagement there. But maybe also just to mention a top of mind example, many of you will probably have Netflix. And in the last couple of years, Netflix has been expanding its offer in terms of, Korean dramas and Spanish shows, and just the diversity of content that's available has skyrocketed the profits of Netflix. So in that way, having diversity of thought and who's involved with, creating that content, making that available, that's a very sort of easy example of how you can see that can create, innovation in terms of your products and services. So you will receive the slides, so you can also look at more resources there. Something that I would maybe also like to ask you, Magdalena, as a question that many companies ask us, is where to start, right? There's so many things that you could start working on. There's so many maybe barriers. Do you have any advice on, okay, if you want to accelerate diversity, equity, inclusion in your company, maybe start here?
I would say get yourself some good sponsors. Make sure that you have people in the C-suite, senior executives that will support you, that would say, yeah, this is important, let's allocate time to this. And from there, you can work on setting up a strategy and looking into KPIs, but you need somebody to back you up.
That's great. I think that's really good advice. It can be hard to work on some of these topics, especially if you maybe do it outside of your own roles and responsibilities. So having sponsors that will support you, that will give you the time, the space, maybe also the resources to work on these topics, and to help make it embedded in the organization, I think that's a really good piece of advice for companies here. If there's any other questions to Magdalena, please feel free to put them in the chat. Magdalena will also be here for the rest of the webinar, so we can also call on you there. But thank you so much, Magdalena, for your time and your insights. And it's great to have you still involved with the UN Global Compact Network.
Anytime, Jamie. Thank you.
All right. Then we're going to move on to the section of the webinar on how you can take action on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as Monica mentioned, we at the UN Global Compact help you on your sustainability journey through connecting you with your peers and experts, helping you to learn about these sustainability topics, helping you become a leader and highlighting best practices, and also to communicate on your progress through the Communication on Progress, which is a yearly reporting mechanism, and Monica will touch on that later. But in terms of our activities on how we support you, we can support you through our online learning platform, the Academy. We'll touch on that. We have peer learning groups where you can come together with other companies working on these topics to exchange best practices and dilemmas. We have deep dive trainings for different sustainability topics. We call those the accelerators because we want you to accelerate on those topics. We have a variety of events, both nationally, but also regionally in the EU, as well as internationally, globally in New York. So that way you can also be engaged and also stay up to date on some of these important topics. And last but not least, we also have campaigns and ways for you to increase your ambitions and to therefore also signal to the rest of your clients, your stakeholders, the business community that you care about these topics and that you want everyone to move in the same direction. So for the Academy, this is actually available to all of your employees of your company. So if you join the UN Global Compact, it doesn't matter whether you're an SME and you have 150 employees, or if you're a multinational with 50,000 employees spread out all over the world. Once you join the UN Global Compact, you have access to our online learning academy. So on the Academy, there's more than 100 sustainability courses, ranging from beginners to advanced. Some courses are sort of introductions to sustainability topics. Some are very technical on, how can you make sure there's a living wage in your supply chain. So there's something for everyone. And the new Academy that we launched this year also has very user-friendly AI-generated recommendations for courses. So that way, depending on your interest and your maturity level on sustainability, you can find the content that's relevant for you. We also have an EU portal. So now there's a lot of new EU legislation on sustainability with the CSRD, the CSDDD, to name a few. And we have a navigation portal within the Academy that will tell you all about those legislations and how you can take action on them. We also have a mobile app, so if you are on the go, you're always working, going from meeting to meeting, you can also look at the Academy on your phone. And we also have campaigns linked to key days. So if you want to spread awareness on some of these key issues, for instance, World Water Day, there are ways for you to also promote these sustainability issues within your organization on key days. We also have separately from the Academy tools and guidance that you can use. So for instance, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, here are a few that can be helpful to you. We have what we call the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool, and the WEPS stands for Women's Empowerment Principles. It's developed by the UN Global Compact and UN Women. And this is a tool to show you where are your gaps within your organization when it comes to gender inequality. Where can you maybe already do a little bit better from yellow to green, whereas, which areas are red for you and really require your attention as soon as possible. And then we have the UN LGBTIQ+ Standards Gap Analysis Tool. Similar to the GAPS tool for gender equality, there's one focusing on how inclusive is your organization when it comes to LGBTIQ+ people, and how can you maybe have policies and efforts to increase your inclusive level. Now, also coming very soon is a new global DEI toolkit. So this is covering, more than just gender, more than just LGBTIQ+, but all aspects of how you can be more inclusive as an organization with very practical steps. So you can follow that toolkit and then, of course, start implementing real positive impact. Now, the accelerators, those are our deep dive trainings for sustainability. Here, you either join for 6 months or 8 months, depending on the specific training, and you work on a practical action plan on how you can improve on these sustainability topics. So it's really focused on practical corporate change and having an impact. So it's not just theory, it's also practice. You work on these issues through the training. You can share best practices with peers, at the local level, but also internationally, because these trainings are rolled out both globally and in the Netherlands. And you can therefore also have, a lot of mixed ways of learning. We do some things through the Academy, do some things in actual local in-person sessions. So that way, there's a lot of ways to be engaged through these trainings. So there's a few mentioned here on the screen, but I'll specifically touch on the Target Gender Equality Accelerator, since that focuses on the DEI topic today. So our Target Gender Equality Accelerator, we've run for a few years now. And here it's really focused on improving women's representation, participation, and leadership across all management levels, and to ensure equal pay for work of equal value. So this is something that in theory should already happen in your organization, but we know that quite some companies still struggle to achieve this. and therefore this training helps you to actually move closer to that. So the target group for this training, who should join, it can be a range of people. So if you're already focused on DEI, this would be great. But also we really encourage you to have a wide range of people involved in these topics. So if you're working on HR, on environmental, social and governance issues, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and so on, there's probably a way for you to contribute your knowledge and to gain more knowledge for your work as well. The timeline for this training is September of this year until March, International Women's Day next year. So that way you can have a nice period of months where you focus on these trainings. And it's free for UN Global Compact participants. So if you join, you can also join this training for free. We also cover a lot of the new EU legislation in this training. So if you want to know how, for instance, diversity and inclusion or gender equality is tied into the CSRD, CSDDD, and the new EU Pay Transparency Directive, that will also be covered by the training. And applications are open now. So when you get the slides, and also, Linda, my colleague, will share a link in the chat, I'm sure, you can sign up to this training. And of course, there's an overview of some of the companies who joined last year, and we're partnering with UN Women. So it's a great program. We see a lot of positive impact through this, so highly encourage you to check it out. Now, maybe you're a bit more mature when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and you just want to chat with other companies who have also been working on these issues to see what are they bumping into, what can you learn from them? And that's where our peer learning group for diversity, equity, and inclusion can come in really handy for you. So we've already started for a few years now. The latest group has just launched, but you can start joining UN Global Compact to join the next launch for next year. And here you come together with these professionals to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have 5 in-person sessions that follow the Chatham House rules. So it's a confidential space for you to exchange your information and knowledge. You can become a leader, so you can actually help shape the peer learning sessions by becoming a co-lead of the group. And if you just want to join as a participant, there's a small fee added to that. And that's just to make sure that people don't drop off throughout the year. And it's really a learning community that you benefit from. So here, there's more information available on our website. And here you can see on the screen also a few topics that were covered in the last few years and the topics that we'll cover this year. So a wide range of issues, really by companies for companies. We have a range of events. I won't name all of them, but some that are coming up soon that could be interesting to you is we have the Night Against Sexual Violence, where we as a UN Global Compact network are walking to raise awareness about the issue of sexual violence. We also know that this is still a prominent issue within companies, not just sexual violence, but transgressive behavior, overschrijdend gedrag. So we want to take a stand and let people know that this is not acceptable anywhere, and also not in the workplace. So you can join a campaign like that to raise awareness within your company or within your network. We also have a lot of meetings where you can meet other peers, like our General Assembly in June. We have a Raise the SDG Flag campaign, and we have our anniversary this year, our 25th anniversary. So we have lots of different events and exciting campaigns coming up related around that. Now, if you want to be posted on some of these events, as well as our broader sustainability events, then you can join our newsletter and our website. And of course, you can always approach us directly as well to see if we can contribute to anything you're organizing. Now, last but not least, if you want to raise your ambition, that's a really important way that you can take action on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have launched in 2023 the Global Forward Faster campaign, and these are the 5 areas where companies can make the biggest positive impact. So it can be around climate, right? Becoming a science-based target, net zero committed. It can be around gender, so equal pay for work of equal value, equal representation. It can be around living wage in your supply chain. It could be around more sustainable investments, as well as protecting water basins. So these are the 5 areas where companies can make the biggest impact. And by committing to these ambitious targets, you're showing to your stakeholders and to your employees that you want to make an impact in these areas, and you're committed to doing that. And we have, fortunately, a lot of guidance and action toolkits to help you make a positive impact in these areas. Now, last but not least, this sounds great. You want to take action, you want to join. how can you do that? And this is where I'll hand over to Monica. Monica, over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. Let me see if I can take over. Yes. So I think there is not much left to say, but just to remind you that we are here to support you through your sustainability journey, from companies that are starting with your sustainability to front runners. We're here to help you out. So we will help you to connect with like-minded peers. As Jamie mentioned, with our peer learning groups, we run them nationally, but also European. And also we have our global events. So during the Climate Week, the ANGA, in New York, we also host our Leader Summit, which is a big event where all like-minded leaders meet up every year. We can also provide you the learning. So Jamie has mentioned a couple of courses that you can have on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we have also other topics, more than 100 courses available, and also our accelerators programs, we can help to train your team in specific topics. And lastly, we also require our participants to communicate on the progress. And by doing so, we will help you to build trust and credibility, both for your internal and external stakeholders. So that's a requirement when you want to join our DEI Global Compact, that you will have to report every year. However, when you join now, you will have to report the year after. So we also give you some time to get to acknowledge our system, get to know how to report, and we will guide you through the process. So I think the only thing that is left is that become a part of the global movement towards sustainability. Don't stay behind and wait for regulations, but actually move forward faster now that is needed. This is also our annual contribution. So you have also questions. This is the revenue, gross revenue or sales that you have to take into account. And this is also important because we are an initiative from the United Nations, and we are funded by our participants as well. So this is how we are getting, being able to roll out all these courses. So if you have any remaining questions, please drop it in the chat. And thank you all for being part of this session.
Thank you, everyone. We're here for a couple more minutes to see if there's any questions you have around joining or around how you can take more action. And we want to thank you for your time and your passion for this topic. Great. If there are no questions, please look forward to the slides and the recording of this session, where you can find all the links to the information shared. And of course, you can learn more about how to join the UN Global Compact. So thank you so much for joining, and a big thank you also to Linda in the background for your help, and our very amazing speaker, Magdalena Guaia. Thank you so much, Magdalena, for joining us today.
Anytime. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, I think we